270 men set sail with Magellan in 1519. Only 18 returned alive 3 years later. How did they survive what maps called impossible? Welcome to the History Uncovered. Today we experience one day aboard history's most dangerous voyage. Stay until the end to witness their extraordinary reality. First, dawn breaks over the wooden prison. Darkness slowly surrendered to gray light as João opened his eyes in the suffocating quarters below deck. His body had molded itself to the hard planks over months of sleeping in this cramped wooden tomb. The creaking of timber and the eternal slosh of water against the hull formed his morning symphony. Around him 40 men stirred like corpses coming back to life in the fetid darkness. Salt crystals covered every surface, creating a white frost that never melted in this perpetual dampness. The air tasted of unwashed bodies, rotting wood, and the acrid bite of bilge water seeping from below. João's hands moved to his face, feeling the stubble and the salt caked in his beard. His calloused fingers bore the scars of endless rope work and the yellow stains of labor. Every joint in his body ached with a pain that had become as familiar as breathing. The bell rang twice above, sending its metallic command through the wooden walls into sleeping minds. Boots thundered across the deck as the night watch ended and day watch began their endless duties. João pushed himself upright, feeling the ship roll beneath him in rhythms his body knew by heart. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, with teeth sharper than any rat in the hold below. The ship's biscuits had been reduced to mere crumbs rationed like precious jewels among desperate men. He wondered how many more weeks they could survive on diminishing supplies that mocked their appetites. Other sailors emerged from their hammocks and sleeping spots moving like shadows in the dim light. Their faces told stories of scurvy, malnutrition, and the constant proximity to death on this journey. Each man here had gambled everything on promises of glory and gold that seemed laughable now. He climbed the narrow ladder toward the deck, feeling the cool air rush down to meet him. The motion of ascending while the ship pitched and rolled required no thought after these endless months. His body had become part of the vessel, moving with it rather than against its rhythms. Breaking through into daylight, João squinted against the gray dawn that painted the ocean in shades of steel. The horizon stretched in every direction, showing nothing but water meeting sky in an endless circle. The sight still filled him with wonder and terror, in equal measure, despite its familiarity. Captain Magellan stood near the stern, consulting with his officers over charts and astronomical instruments. The commander's iron will had driven them through impossible straits and across unknown waters that swallowed ships. João felt grateful that such terrible decisions belonged to other men while he simply followed orders. Second, morning labor and the battle for survival. The boatswain's whistle cut through the morning air like a blade summoning every able body to stations. João fell in line with the other sailors as the officer's eyes scanned them for weakness. Any sign of illness or shirking meant reduced rations or worse in this world, where strength determined survival. 4 men, including João, hauled water barrels up from the hold where they were stored in darkness. Each drop of fresh water represented life itself, measured and guarded more carefully than any treasure. They distributed the morning ration, while sailors lined up with desperate eyes and trembling hands extended. The rigging called to João, as it did every morning, demanding inspection and maintenance without end. He climbed the rope ladder with movements born of repetition, his hands finding holds without conscious direction. The wind grew stronger as he ascended, making the ship seem small and fragile beneath him. Miguel worked beside him, checking knots and splices with fingers that never missed worn fibers or weakness. The Portuguese sailor had become João's closest ally in this floating prison of wood and canvas. Together they ensured the ropes that held their world together would not snap when storms tested them. Below on deck, other sailors scrubbed planks with rough stones and seawater in endless circular motions. The repetitive work created a rhythm that matched the ship's movement through the swells around them. Everything aboard demanded constant care, or else the sea would claim what negligence abandoned to her. The navigator emerged carrying his precious instruments that cost more than most sailors earned in lifetimes. He squinted at the sun through brass and glass, calculating their position on waters no European knew. João watched with fascination, even though the mathematics remained as foreign as the distant stars themselves. Wind shifted, forcing the crew to adjust sails in a coordinated dance of human effort and physics. The sailmaster's commands sent men racing up masts like spiders climbing invisible threads toward the heavens. Canvas snapped and billowed as it caught the breeze, driving them ever westward into the unknown. João descended to help with the pumps that fought the eternal battle against rising bilge water. Every wooden ship leaked, and constant pumping prevented the slow drowning that threatened from below their feet. His arms burned with familiar fire as he fell into the rhythm that kept death at bay. A cry from above brought all eyes to dolphins racing alongside the bow, cutting through waves effortlessly. The graceful creatures seemed to mock the struggling humans in their clumsy wooden vessel fighting the ocean. Yet their presence brought smiles to faces that rarely remembered how to form such expressions anymore. Third, midday respite and brotherhood forged in hardship. The sun climbed to its zenith, casting harsh light and unforgiving heat across the crowded deck below. João joined the line for his meal ration, knowing the portions grew smaller with each passing week. The cook ladled watery soup into wooden bowls while dispensing hardtack biscuits, crawling with tiny weevils nobody mentioned. He settled onto a coiled rope beside Miguel and old Fernando, whose weathered face mapped decades at sea. The three ate in silence at first, letting the meager food settle into stomachs that had forgotten fullness. Around them, conversations rose in multiple languages, creating a babel of Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and unknown tongues. Fernando launched into tales of his voyage with Columbus to lands filled with gold and naked peoples. His gnarled hands gestured wildly as he described storms that dwarfed anything they had yet encountered. João listened hungrily, for such stories fed imagination when physical food failed to satisfy growing appetites. Miguel produced the small wooden cross his wife had pressed into his palm before they sailed away. He ran his thumb over its smooth surface, worn down by constant touch and desperate prayers. The gesture spoke of longing that words could never capture in this world of only men. Someone started a card game with the deck so worn the suits were barely visible anymore. Laughter erupted when Pedro lost his extra biscuit ration, cursing his fortune to the uncaring heavens. These simple pleasures reminded them they remained human, despite the ocean's attempt to reduce them to beasts. Two sailors nearly came to blows over a perceived insult delivered during the game's heated moments. The bosun intervened with harsh words and the ever-present threat of the lash that kept order. Tempers flared easily in such confined spaces where escape from one another proved impossible for months. João stretched out on sun-warmed planks, letting heat soak into bones that felt perpetually chilled and damp. He closed his eyes, listening to the symphony of ship sounds that had become more familiar than silence. In these brief moments, he could almost forget the hunger, the fear, the endless miles yet to sail. The carpenter worked nearby, replacing planks damaged when the last storm had nearly torn them all to pieces. His tools sang their own melody as he shaped wood to fit seamlessly into the ship's structure. Every man aboard possessed skills that contributed to their collective survival in ways both obvious and subtle. Antonio's wooden flute produced a simple haunting melody that drifted across the deck, touching every heart present. The music spoke of homes left behind, of lovers waiting, of children growing up without fathers present. Some men wiped their eyes, blaming the salt spray, when everyone knew tears fell freely unbidden. Fourth, afternoon trials when nature shows her teeth. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, like an approaching army marching toward them with malevolent purpose. The wind picked up, sending the ship rolling more heavily through waves that grew taller with each minute. All hands moved to battle stations, preparing for the storm everyone knew would test their very existence. João secured everything movable on deck, lashing barrels and equipment with extra rope against what approached. Loose items became deadly projectiles when nature unleashed her fury upon their fragile wooden world. The experienced sailors worked with grim efficiency, born of surviving too many such encounters with death. The first mate's voice boomed across the deck, sending men scrambling to reduce sail before wind shredded canvas. Too much sail in a storm could snap masts like twigs or capsize the vessel entirely. João hauled on lines until his bleeding hands screamed protest, working in perfect synchronization with desperate crewmates. Rain arrived in sheets so thick visibility vanished beyond the length of outstretched arms before faces. The deck became a treacherous skating surface as water sluiced across planks, seeking any crack to flood below. João gripped the rigging with every ounce of strength, feeling the ship buck beneath him like an angry beast. Thunder exploded overhead with force that seemed capable of splitting the very fabric of heaven itself. Lightning illuminated the chaos in stark flashes, revealing terror painted on every visible face around him. They had survived many storms, but each new tempest brought fresh fear that their luck might finally expire. Waves towered above the deck, crashing down with enough force to sweep men into the churning sea. João wedged himself between mast and railing, holding on with grip born of pure desperation and will. Salt water filled his mouth and nose as he struggled to breathe between the massive swells. The helmsman battled the wheel with 3 other sailors, adding their strength to prevent turning broadside. His muscles bulged with impossible effort as the rudder threatened to tear itself free from control. If they turned parallel to the waves, the ship would roll and sink within heartbeats, taking everyone down. For hours that felt like lifetimes, the storm raged, testing every plank rope and human soul aboard. Men prayed in languages their mothers taught them, calling on saints and God for deliverance from this watery hell. João added his whispered pleas to the cacophony, though he wondered if heaven could hear above the tempest. Finally, the clouds began breaking, allowing desperate shafts of sunlight to pierce through the dissipating gloom around them. The waves gradually calmed as wind lost its murderous fury, returning to something merely dangerous instead of deadly. The crew emerged from shelters, counting heads and checking for damage, while thanking whatever gods might exist. Fifth, evening descends on the survivors. The setting sun painted the western sky in colors so vivid they seemed impossible after the storm's gray fury. João stood at the rail, watching the spectacle unfold as bone-deep exhaustion settled over his battered body. Another day had passed, bringing them closer to whatever fate awaited beyond the horizon they chased endlessly. Evening duties proceeded with quiet efficiency as men worked to repair damage inflicted by nature's afternoon assault. The carpenter assessed cracked beams, while others spliced torn ropes with fingers that could barely feel anymore. Everyone understood tomorrow would bring new trials, requiring the ship to be ready for whatever the ocean decided. The cook produced a slightly larger ration, using some precious dried meat from the dwindling stores below. João savored every bite, making the food last as long as humanly possible, before swallowing reluctantly. Around him, men ate with the same careful deliberation, knowing such abundance came rarely on this endless voyage. Stars emerged one by one, transforming the darkening sky into a map of lights only the navigator understood. He studied their positions intently, using celestial geometry to verify their course across this trackless ocean waste. João marveled at men who could read heaven as easily as priests read their sacred books. Some sailors gathered near the bow, singing songs that spoke of home in voices roughened by salt air. Their harmonies blended together, creating beauty that seemed impossible from such hardened, desperate men as these. The music soothed spirits battered by the day and the uncertainty of all the days yet to come. João descended below deck, where hammocks swung gently with the ship's now peaceful motion through calm waters. He claimed his sleeping space among the exhausted men who sought rest before the next watch began. The familiar smells and sounds surrounded him, providing strange comfort in their very predictability and constancy. Miguel said his evening prayers aloud, clutching the cross while his lips moved through practiced words of faith. João listened to the familiar Portuguese phrases, finding peace in their rhythm even without understanding their precise meaning. Faith took many forms aboard the ship, but it sustained men when nothing else could. The lanterns cast moving shadows that danced across wooden walls and ceiling, like spirits watching over them. Someone told a quiet tale about sea monsters glimpsed during the storm's height, while others scoffed nervously. But their eyes betrayed that half of them believed such creatures might indeed inhabit these unknown waters. João closed his eyes, feeling the ship rock him towards sleep, despite the hardness beneath his weary body. Tomorrow would bring more labor, more danger. More miles sailed into regions no Christian had ever witnessed before. But tonight he could rest, knowing he had survived another day in this wooden world suspended between heaven and sea. This was merely one day of a journey lasting over 1,000 days that changed history forever. If this glimpse into the past moved you, like this video and subscribe to the History Uncovered for more untold stories. Which historical voyage should we explore next? Share your thoughts below.